Hey viewers, some trials reveal evidence, others reveal everything else. What started as a normal day inside courtroom 7B turned into something no one was ready to process, not even the people behind the bench. A former bodyguard's testimony cracked open more than just secrets. Diddy aren't just fighting allegations, they're fighting something bigger. Let's get into it. Chapter 1: Mop Water and Rumors. They always say courtrooms are for the living, but I've been here long enough to know that ain't true. You mop floors long enough, you stop thinking about time the same way. Years blend, cases blur, faces fade, but the things they leave behind, those linger, sweat in the cracks between tiles, skin flakes behind the witness box. The kind of residue no amount of bleach can wash out. And today was different, not because of what was said, not yet, but because of what wasn't. Because of what you feel before anything even starts. I've cleaned courtroom 7B for going on 13 years. 13. I've seen it all. Divorce breakdowns that looked like exorcisms. White-collar boys trembling like toddlers. A preacher once tried to speak in tongues during his sentencing. But this trial, this one's not like the rest. It started 2 nights ago. I was on overtime trying to buff out a rust ring someone left under the defense table. Don't know if it was from a flask or a tear-stained crucifix, but it left a mark. I'm alone, or so I thought, until I pass near the judge's chamber and see them, muddy boot prints, still wet, still fresh. That floor had just been mopped 20 minutes before. Nobody was scheduled to be in there. Security logs showed no one came through. I crouched to take a closer look, and that's when I saw the fingerprint. Not on the door handle. No, on the edge of the mop sink in the supply closet, just one, big, smudged, smelled like iron, and it stuck to my thoughts like gum under a bench. It still does. And then there was this morning. Court was 2 hours from starting, sun barely up, and I was wheeling in the fresh mop water by the loading dock when I heard him. 2 voices, low, tense, clipped like they didn't want to be overheard but couldn't stop themselves. One said, "Diddy and the Queen, same side of the bench now, but not for long." That's what made me stop. I leaned behind the corner, still out of view, but the conversation ended quick, just footsteps fatting fast. I peeked, nobody there, no car doors, no gate buzzers. Just steam from the sewer vent curling into the dawn air, like breath from something that didn't belong. That's when I knew today would be different. When I finally walked into courtroom 7B, that tension you sometimes get, the kind that wraps around your ribs and doesn't let go, it was already waiting. It sat in the corners, in the seal above the judge's bench, in the wood grain of the gallery benches. And right there, front and center on the witness stand, they'd already prepped the nameplate, black. I paused. The name stung for some reason, even though it shouldn't, but it did. Former security detail, it said beneath. And below that on the docket monitor, bold and sharp in black font, Combs. Diddy. That's when the lights flickered, not out, just dim, like they were remembering something terrible. I kept going with my routine, but slower than usual. Every sweep of the mop felt like it was erasing something invisible I wasn't supposed to see. Or worse, covering it. The benches were colder than usual, like the wood had absorbed something bad overnight. I've been in this room during winter storms and midsummer heat, but it's never felt like this. Not cold like temperature, cold like absence. And then I noticed it, etched into the wood under the second-row seat near the prosecution's table. We saw, all caps, jagged, like it was carved in panic or defiance, maybe both. That seat was scrubbed 2 days ago. I would seen it. By the time people started filing in, you could feel the air tighten. Not from noise, but from expectation. Everyone trying to pretend they weren't waiting for what they already knew. I caught a glimpse of the jury room door. It opened just an inch too long. You could see the bailiff wiping sweat off his brow, like someone had whispered a secret and left him with it. And then the lawyers came in. Diddy walked in flanked by that new guy, some entertainment firm junior associate who looked like he was already trying not to vomit. He clutched his briefcase like it was his last defense in a sword fight. Diddy, on the other hand, moved slow, confident, too confident for a man on trial. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Those eyes scanned the room, landed on the gallery like he was searching for someone, or something. Then he looked right at me. I know it sounds crazy, thinking a man like that would notice the janitor in the corner with a mop and an old back brace, but he did. His eyes didn't just glance. They paused, like he was remembering something, or checking if I remembered him, which I don't, I think. But the energy shifted when walked in. No fanfare, no entourage, just her and her lawyer. The room didn't gasp, but it may as well have. Even silence has weight, and in that moment the air could buckled steel beams. She didn't look at Diddy, didn't look at anyone, just walked in like she knew her presence was enough, sat down behind the defense bench. Same side, same table, opposite corners. The nameplate still sat on the witness stand, untouched, black. I kept cleaning slower now, half to eavesdrop, half because I didn't want to miss anything. A paper fell off the clerk's desk and slid across the floor toward me. I picked it up, standard court script, but on the back, scribbled in blue ink, "He will say IT today." No name, no initials, just that. I tucked it into my jumpsuit pocket and moved on. I've kept it, still don't know why. By 9:00 a.m., every seat was filled. Spectators, media, victims, families. You could feel the way people clutched their elbows or crossed their ankles, trying to stay calm, trying not to look like they were holding their breath. But they were. And then the door opened. Not the big one, the side door near the clerk's station. Black entered. The man looked 10 years older than the last photo I saw, gaunt, trembling, as if he just stepped out of a nightmare and into the spotlight. He didn't speak right away. Just stood there staring at the courtroom like it was a haunted house and every wall had eyes. And I swear to you I saw his hands. They weren't shaking. They were clutching the armrests like the bench might fall away from under him. When he finally sat, the judge called order and my mop hit a crack in the tile. Water sloshed. It sounded louder than it should, like a warning shot. Then the bailiff leaned toward the judge, whispered something. The judge stiffened. No one else noticed, but I did. It was small, but it was real. The kind of stiffness that only comes when you're told a truth you hope to avoid. The room quieted. Black raised his right hand, swore the oath. Then he looked straight at, not at Diddy, at her. And he said, "I never wanted to speak, but it's time. You told me I wouldn't have to, but you knew this day would come." Gasps audible. One woman dropped her pen. It rolled under the gallery bench. The security officer didn't even bend to pick it up. The judge didn't stop him. "And Diddy," still smiling, not blinking, like he was watching a rerun he'd memorized years ago. I backed into the corner, mop handle still in my grip, but I wasn't cleaning anymore. I was listening, starring, heart pounding, because whatever was about to be said, it wasn't in the docket, it wasn't in the exhibits, and I don't think it was ever meant for public ears. Only for whoever was watching from the shadows of the room. Chapter 2, the testimony that shook the sealant. You ever try to fix a pipe while God and the devil are arguing 4 feet from your head? That's what it felt like that morning. I was crouched low behind the jury box, wrench in one hand, flashlight cradled under my chin, pretending like the drip-drip from a busted valve was the only thing keeping me tethered to earth. But in truth, every word echoing off the walls of courtroom 7B, every syllable that dropped from Black's mouth, sounded like a curse being read out loud in a church. The air was wrong before they even walked in. You learn things when you mop the same floors every day for 13 years. You can tell the mood of a room by how the tiles echo. And today, no echo, just this tight pressure, like the walls themselves didn't want to hear what was coming. Black was early. He walked in 15 minutes before the judge, straight-backed and silent, wearing a navy blue suit that didn't quite hide the swelling in his neck. His lapel pin caught my eye first, a broken hourglass, not fancy, not shiny, just deliberate, like it meant something you weren't supposed to ask about. His hands were the size of shovel heads. I watched him take his seat at the witness stand and lean back as if he'd been waiting years for this moment. The docket hadn't lied, right there under his name. Combs Crossref. Diddy. The room shivered like it heard the name in a different key. Diddy was already seated, sunglasses on indoors, which always made me suspicious of a man. You're not at the Met Gala, my guy, this is federal court. And yet he looked less like a defendant and more like someone waiting for his private jet to refuel. But something shifted when started speaking. He didn't stutter, didn't hesitate, just lifted his chin and said, "In June 2016, I watched Combs load 2 unconscious bodies into the back of a hotel delivery van behind the Grand in Miami. I was instructed not to speak. I obeyed, until now." Silence. The kind of silence that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. The court reporter's fingers stopped mid-keystroke. The clerk fumbled with a water pitcher. His team sat like mannequins, utterly still, but didn't object. And that, to me, was the loudest sound in the room. Continued, voice flat but deliberate. Operation, that was the name on the packet. 3 pages, 1 drop-off location, 1 pickup. He turned his head slightly, looking in Diddy's direction but not fully making eye contact. And she was there, standing near the service exit, head covered, speaking into a mic, telling us where to drive. No one said her name, but everyone looked at the table where counsel sat. Still no objections. Now I ain't never been part of no conspiracy, but I've cleaned up after them. I've wiped blood off stair rails where the official record said wine accident. I've vacuumed glass from conference rooms after a popped that somehow required 7 bodyguards and an NDA. But this wasn't mop-and-go territory. This was concrete being ripped up and secrets buried underneath. Right as said the words, drop-off went sideways, something screeched overhead. The fire alarm for exactly 3 seconds, not long enough to trigger a panic, not short enough to be ignored. The lights didn't flash, the sprinklers didn't go off, but something sizzled in the air like ozone mixed with burnt popcorn. I ducked lower behind the box, fingers tightening around the wrench. I thought maybe a glitch, maybe a coincidence, until I caught the expression on Diddy's face. Not fear, not confusion. Rage, pure, contained, tooth-grinding rage. His jaw twitched once, twice. Then he leaned over to his new attorney and whispered something that made the man visibly swallow and nod without looking up. That new lawyer, I'd seen him earlier in the break room shaking so bad he spilled coffee on his lap and didn't even flinch. Poor bastard looked like a substitute teacher handed the nuclear codes. Didn't flinch, he said. When we arrived at the location, industrial cold storage near there were people waiting, men in suits, no names, no badges. They called her ma'am. They called him sir. They said, load it, shut it, drive away. Forget tonight ever happened. Another pause. The judge hadn't interrupted once. The room pulsed, and then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Court protocol usually means you submit stuff in advance, but he just held it up. This was the receipt, the only copy. The judge motioned for a bailiff. As the bailiff approached, I noticed something dripping from the paper, something amber-colored, thick, sticky. Honey? Resin? I don't know, it didn't look like ink. The bailiff hesitated to touch it. I don't blame him. Set the paper on the edge of the witness box and leaned back again, like he'd been holding his breath for years, and finally exhaled. That's when I noticed his hands were shaking. "Mr. Black," the judge finally said, "do you understand the gravity of your statements?" "I do." "Are you aware this implicates multiple high-profile individuals in what may amount to obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and potential homicide?" "I am." "Then why now?" Blinked slowly. "Because the rest of them are gone and I ain't sleeping anymore." Somewhere near the back row, a woman stood up and left. No noise. Just stood and walked like she'd heard what she needed and didn't want to be in the room when the devil came knocking. I stayed crouched behind the box another 20 minutes. My knees were cramping. My flashlight died. I didn't dare move, not until recess was called and the room began to breathe again. As I stood up and gathered my tools, I noticed the spot where I'd set the paper was still sticky. Not wet, just sticky. Like whatever had dripped from it was now part of the wood grain. I made a note to clean it later. But when I came back after lunch, that patch of wood had already been sanded and sealed. By who? No one claimed it. No one ever claims it when something important vanishes around here. I saw Diddy leaving during the break, surrounded by guards, sunglasses still on, but I swear, and I mean I swear, as he passed the courtroom door, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a fresh paper clip. He bent it once in his fingers, just once, into a shape. A shape I recognized. A fly. The same damn fly shape from the notebook sketches. I dropped my wrench. Didn't even bother picking it up. Chapter 3. The vent that shouldn't rattle. There are certain sounds a building makes that no one hears but me. Pipes whine when the temperature dips below 62. Floorboards sigh just after the cleaning crew clocks out. And vents, well, vents only talk when something trying to hide. That afternoon, after the courtroom emptied out for recess, I was back under the gallery benches with my mop and a stiff back, thinking about Black's words-coded messages taped behind urinals, the warehouse near Burbank, and of course, they've gone quiet. Or disappeared. I didn't know what operation was, but I knew what a man's face looks like when he's not sure if the truth will get him killed or get him free. Looked like both. I was sweeping near the defense table where Diddy had been sitting, twitching like a bad signal trying to stabilize. The moment Black mentioned the warehouse, Diddy shifted under his coat like ants were crawling inside the lining. Then I heard it. The vent above his seat let out a short, sharp rattle, not the kind of loose screw or air pressure whistle. It was deliberate, metal brushing metal rhythmically like fingernails on a cage. It never used to make that sound. I stood up slowly, bracing my knees. My flashlight was in the utility pouch on my belt, the one nobody ever bothers to check because, well, I'm just Reuben, just the janitor. I shined the light straight into the grill. First glance, nothing. Second glance, something caught the beam. At first, I thought it was a discarded wig or a rat nest, but when I leaned in closer, my stomach clenched. It was hair, long, curly, clearly human, and tied into a thick knot with a strip of what looked like leather. But what really hit me was what sat at the center of it, a stone. Jet black, rough edges, almost volcanic. The kind of thing you find in places that no longer remember light. I didn't think, I just reached in, it loose with my pocket screwdriver and stuffed it into my jumpsuit pocket like a man hiding a secret from himself. I didn't tell security. I didn't log it. I didn't even toss it in the hazardous waste bag. Something in me didn't want to let it go, not yet. Not long after I walked away, Diddy returned to his seat. I watched from behind the wooden gallery gate, pretending to fiddle with a busted wheel on my mop cart. The minute he sat under that vent, his whole posture changed. He twitched again, more violently. One leg jerked beneath the table like he'd been shocked. His face stayed composed, tight, unreadable, but his hand gripped the table like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Black kept talking. He mentioned the warehouse like it was a place we should all know. Burbank, by the water treatment plant, red light above the door always blinking even when the power's cut, he said. That's where the transfers happened, at least twice that I saw, unmarked vans, cold storage inside. The gallery stayed quiet, people leaned in, even the stenographer. Black adjusted his tie, then added something that made my skin feel like it was peeling off my bones. The messages, they were taped behind the urinals in the club. Handwritten in mirror ink, same handwriting every time, different names. One said, "Don't forget Reuben." He paused. That wasn't the only name, there was a list. I froze. My name ain't exactly rare, but it ain't exactly common in Diddy's world either. The judge leaned forward, clearly rattled. His team stayed quiet, too quiet. Diddy's junior attorney, the kid with the ink-stained cuffs, scribbled something on his legal pad and passed it to a clerk without looking up. That's when the judge called for a recess. The moment people stood up and chairs scratched back, I slipped away from my cart and made my way toward the back hallway. I didn't go to the staff lounge or the locker room. I went to the restroom nearest the judge's chamber, the one rarely used since the newer bathrooms were put in last year. I don't know what pulled me there. Instinct, maybe. Or maybe it was the way Black had said urinals, like a man recalling a grave, not a bathroom. I checked each stall, nothing out of place. But then I lifted the lid off the last toilet tank, the one near the wall that always sweats in summer. Inside, floating on the surface like it had just been laid there, was a folded piece of yellow paper. I took it out, unfolded it with damp fingers. Check the audio channel, channel 6. No name, no signature, just that. I stared at the note for a long while. Channel 6? That wasn't standard courtroom audio. Channel 1 was a witness mic. Channel 2 was the prosecution. Channel 3 defense. Channel 4 the judge. Channel 5 was ambient. Channel 6 wasn't supposed to be anything, at least not on my logs. I tucked the note in my pocket, right next to the hair bundle and the stone. I felt like a thief in my own house. When I returned to courtroom 7B, the lights had dimmed slightly, just enough to notice if you knew what they were supposed to be. The overhead panels flickered once, then steadied. Black was gone for the moment. The gallery whispered. People hunched together like conspirators instead of observers. Diddy was back in his seat, not twitching anymore, just still, too still. I thought about the stone in my pocket. I hadn't felt it move, but I swear the heat from it pulsed every few seconds. Warm, then cold, like it was breathing. As I ran a cloth over the defense table under the guise of a quick clean, I noticed something etched lightly into the wood, almost like a fingerprint had dragged through a thin layer of dust. A spiral, tight, coiling inward like a drain. I ran my finger across it. The texture was rougher than wood should be, almost brittle. I didn't like it. I wiped it clean. Later that night, after the building cleared out and security did their half-hearted rounds, I went back to the AV room. I still had keys. I always had keys. I unlocked the side panel to the master audio interface, turned the dial to channel 6, and held my breath. At first, nothing, just static. Then a tone, not a beep, a hum, deep resonant, like a choir note held underwater. Then came the voices. They weren't from that day's session, or any session I'd ever cleaned up after. They were older. Timelines warped, they bled into each other. A woman whispering in what sounded like Latin, a man gasping out a prayer, footsteps, silence, then Diddy's voice. Only it didn't sound like him, not fully. It was his cadence, his inflection, but layered with something else, something lower. Like another voice inside him was trying to take control but couldn't quite get through. I told them, the voice said. They wouldn't listen, so I stopped speaking like them. The track was cut off. The interface buzzed. A warning flashed across the screen, unauthorized access, logged. I killed the audio and locked everything back up. As I stepped into the hallway, I saw something glint at the far end. A paper clip, just one, bent into the shape of an insect. A fly. Same shape carved into the side of the mop sink last week. I didn't pick it up. I walked past it, straight to the sat down, and finally took the stone out of my pocket. It is warmer now, like it knew it had been found. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew we were past the point of court proceedings. This wasn't about evidence anymore. This was about what remained hidden because no one ever wanted to dig deep enough, or what punished those who did. And Black, he wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Chapter 4, Channel 6 and the Uncut Screams. I'd been in the AV room before. Hell, I'd mopped it more times than I could count, sprayed lemon disinfectant under the racks, even wiped fingerprints off the volume dials when no one was looking. But I had never, not once, touched the master console. That was for them, the tech crew interns, sometimes a clerk. Not me, not Ruben. But that afternoon, as the courtroom emptied out for lunch and the bailiffs smoked in the alleyway like they always did, something in my chest told me to go. Not out of curiosity, out of instinct. Channel 6. That note from the toilet tank still pulsed behind my eyes. Paper soggy, writing scrawled in what I hoped was pen and not blood. Just 3 words, check Channel 6. I didn't know who left it, didn't know what it meant. But I knew the scent on the paper, somewhere between old copper and burning lavender. It's the same scent I found on the sink when that fingerprint appeared. The AV room was on the 2nd floor behind a keypad door. I knew the bypass code from watching too many techs punch it in. 9420. Same year this courthouse was built. Inside, it smelled of machine heat and stale. Monitors lined the walls like glass eyes. Most were black, some flickered low static. One showed an empty hallway with a single red balloon hovering midair. I told myself that was unrelated, a prank, a glitch, anything but what it looked like. I walked to the back where the drives were labeled with cheap masking tape. Channel 1, Channel 2, Channel 3, all the way to 12. Channel 6 was split into 2 halves, one marked public stream, the other alt feed. I took the second, inserted the tape into the machine. My palms were sweating through my gloves. The footage opened quiet. The courtroom seen from a high angle, much higher than any of the cameras I'd known were installed, like it was filmed from inside the vent above the judge's bench. I recognized the moment, Black on the stand, testifying about the hotel, the warehouse, the coded urinal messages. His voice was steady, though the court had felt tense. What caught me, though, was... She sat in the 2nd row of the defense's side, flanked by attorneys, her hands folded, gaze straight ahead. But her lips were moving. Slowly, quietly, too quietly. I turned up the audio. Nothing. I rewound, pressed play again. This time I watched closely. Her mouth made shapes her voice didn't match. She said something else entirely. I paused, zoomed, read her lips as best I could. He wakes when the skin folds. What the hell did that mean? I scrubbed forward. The moment she was officially speaking, objecting to something said, her recorded lips match. She was saying something different underneath. A second conversation layered beneath the public one, hidden in plain sight. Her eyes, in that same instant, flicked up toward the ceiling. Right at the vent, I found the hair bundle in. I turned up the volume again, past the limit the console allowed. That's when I heard it. A screaming. Not loud, not sharp, but real. A human voice buried under the courtroom audio, not the kind of sound a machine makes when it glitches. This had breath behind it. Depth, pain. The longer I let it play, the louder it became. Screams layered over each other like someone buried a chorus of agony under the feed. And the timestamp, it began to loop. 11:30, 7:52. 11:30, 7:53. 11:30, 7:54. Then it flicked backward. 11:30, 7:38, 11:30, 7:39. It looped again. The screams are distorted, louder, raw. The screen went black. I took a step back. The machine still whirred like it was playing something, but the screen only showed static. Then a flash, just one frame of a courtroom, not quite the one I knew. Same layout, same benches, but everything was wrong. The gallery was full of mannequins. Every juror was wearing headphones. Diddy wasn't at the defense table. He was standing on the judge's bench, grinning. Behind him, where the flag should been, was a massive fly, wings pinned open, staring straight into the camera. The feed shut off. The AV room's monitors, all of them, switched on at once. Not a courtroom, not anything I recognized, just a word. Remember. White text, black background, flickering like a warning signal. All screens showed the same thing. The lights dimmed. A low buzz began vibrating through the tile floor like something big moving underground. I ripped the tape out of the machine. I didn't return it to the drawer. I stuffed it in my pocket under my cleaning rags and bolted. Didn't log out. Didn't lock the door. Didn't even make sure no one saw me. My instincts screamed louder than the feed had. Whatever I'd seen, it wasn't supposed to be seen. Back in the janitor's closet, I stared at the tape for a long time, its label now smudged. Not alt feed anymore, now it read, "You saw," nothing else, just that. I threw it in the mop bucket, tried to drown it in disinfectant, but the damn thing floated. Not a single label corner curled, it was dry to the touch. The rest of the day, I walked in circles around courtroom 7B. I watched Diddy take his seat again. This time, his hands trembled. His left leg twitched. I heard him murmur under his breath during a sidebar, something about the echoes stacking wrong. I didn't know what he meant. Black returned to the stand, asked to finish the story. The judge allowed it. "I saw her mouth move," said, pointing not at but at the jury box. "The woman in green, back row, I saw her mouthing something the same moment did. I'm telling you, it's not rehearsed, it's shared." Everyone turned to the woman he pointed to. She stared back blankly. Then her lips moved. I swear to God, she mouthed the same phrase I'd just heard say on the feed. "He wakes when the skin folds." No one else reacted. I tried to step forward, tried to say something. But the bailiff looked at me. Just one look, no words, just a shake of the head. And I stopped. I mopped the floor instead. That night I returned to the AV room. I don't know what I was hopping to find. The tapes were gone, all of them, every labeled drawer emptied. Just dust rings where the reels used to sit. On the desk was a note. Not handwritten, typed. "You do unsee." That was all. I checked the monitors again. Nothing now, no feeds, no remember, just a blank reflection of my own face. Tired, drenched in mop water, holding a secret no one would ever believe. Back in my supply closet, I sat on the stool and stared at the bucket where the tape had been. It was gone. No splash, no trace, just gone. I wiped my hands, took the vent bundle, the hair and stone, from my locker where I'd stashed it earlier, thought about throwing it out. Instead, I held it up to the flickering fluorescent light and whispered, "What the hell are you?" No answer. But from somewhere inside the wall, I swear I heard it. A voice, quiet but not mine. "I remembers." Chapter 5, The Whisper Beneath the Bleach. It was too quiet under courtroom 7B. Reuben had worked the night shift for 11 years straight and cleaned every inch of this courthouse, from the chief judge's hallway rugs to the corners behind the water fountains where roaches died of boredom. But there was something about this room, this week, that crawled under his skin and settled in the hollows behind his eyes. And today, the silence didn't feel earned. It felt staged. He'd been sent down to the lower chambers again to unclog a drain. That's what they said. Reuben, mind checking the courtroom pipe under the bench. Clerk says it's backing up again. But there was no backup, not that he could find. The pipes were clear. The bleach bucket still full. And yet, when he pushed the mop back across the defense aisle, the sound of sloshing water echoed too loud, as if something else was sloshing along with it, beneath the floor. He paused there. A plank beneath the defendant's table creaked, not from him, but on its own. A soft breath of wood expanding or something shifting below. Reuben bent down, ran his hand over the seam, and pressed where it bowed. The board didn't resist. It popped up like a tooth loosened too easily. Inside there was a bottle of bleach, only this wasn't your everyday industrial cleaner. It was hollow. Reuben knew the weight of those jugs by heart. This one felt like paper. He lifted the cap, unscrewing it carefully, and there, inside, was a hidden compartment. A compartment stuffed with things that didn't belong anywhere near a courtroom. A miniature tape recorder, cracked along one side like it had been stepped on, but intact. And a photo, a single photo. He pulled it out gently, the paper cold like it had been in a fridge. A girl, not more than 11, lying pale in a hospital bed with IVs strung through her arms like spider webs. Her hair was thin, but her eyes were open wide, locked in that blank stare that children get when they've already seen too much. A tag was stapled to the bottom corner of the picture, typed, not handwritten. She didn't lie, you did. Reuben didn't move, he didn't breathe. The hallway above buzzed with distant murmurs. Court was resuming soon. But down here the air sat thick with chemicals and something else, the taste of metal. He hit play. The tape clicked softly, and then came a voice, low, cracked, southern-tinged. One Reuben didn't recognize by name, but absolutely by tone. It was the voice of someone tired of watching something he could never explain. I was told never to let the words out, the man said. But I heard her say it, heard him say it back, looked me in the eyes and said, we only rent these bodies, he owns the lease. Reuben's stomach flipped. The recorder buzzed slightly as if something was crawling inside it. I asked her who he was. She smiled like it wasn't her answer to give. She said, you've met him already, you just don't remember which face he wore. Then she looked at Diddy, and Diddy, he just nodded, like that was the end of it, like it had already happened. The tape sputtered. Reuben stared ahead, not seeing the bleach bottle anymore. The smell was thick now, not like regular bleach. It smelled wrong, like plastic, like old perfume and something sharper beneath it. When he looked up, the judge's robe was hanging on the far coat hook, except no one was supposed to be here yet. He stepped back. His foot hit the bucket, tipping it, water spilling across the concrete like a mouth opening. The robe didn't move, but it swayed like something had just stepped away from it. Reuben grabbed the recorder and the photo and stuffed them into his cart beneath the rags. He slammed the floorboard shut with his heel and wheeled the cart out, up the corridor toward the main floor. He didn't breathe until he heard the echo of the upstairs courtroom bell, signaling resumption of trial. When he emerged into the hallway, his face must said something he didn't, because the bailiff on duty narrowed his eyes and tilted his chin like he wanted to ask, but didn't. Back in courtroom 7B, the atmosphere was suffocating. The same players sat in the same seats, but something had changed. Reuben couldn't say what. Maybe it was the way Diddy's hands clenched the table a second too long. Maybe it was how refused to blink. Black was back on the stand, testifying. His tone was different now, more exact. He was no longer just accusing, he was unraveling something. And the girl in the photograph, he said. That's who told me the wasn't just for parties. That's who said Diddy took them there for conversion. The prosecutor leaned in. Conversion. Nodded. He said once they went in, they didn't come out the same. Said they left behind something real and came out with something borrowed. Ruben's skin crawled. He didn't want to know what that meant. The judge shifted. The robe, now worn, now real, shivered slightly as if hit by wind no one else felt. Ruben backed out slowly and returned to the janitor's room. He set the recorder down, hit play again. The voice returned, calmer this time. "It ain't the cameras that matter," the man said. "It's what the microphones hear. They're not meant to catch human sounds anymore." And just like that, Ruben remembered something. A sticker on the AV rack that had never made sense. Channel 6, do not root. He'd always assumed it was some internal tech warning. But now it felt like a command. As if summoned by his thoughts, a light in the AV hallway flickered. Ruben walked that way. He passed courtroom 6, empty, and moved toward the AV control closet. When he reached for the handle, it opened before he touched it. Inside, pitch dark except for the glow of one red light on the central console. He stepped in. Channel 6 blinked on screen. Static, then footage. He saw the courtroom, but from a strange angle, almost like the lens wasn't fixed to a wall but floating behind the jury. Black was mid-testimony, sat behind Diddy. But her lips were wrong. They weren't moving the way her voice sounded. It was like she was mimicking something else. Echoing, Ruben leaned closer. There, beneath her words, a sound, low, screeching. A scream. Not digital, not dubbed. Real, buried under the audio. He replayed the file. The scream grew louder. The timestamp on the screen began to loop back, over and over again. Then the screen went black. One word flashed. Remembers. All the monitors flicked on at once, filling the room with light that stung Ruben's eyes. He staggered back. On every screen, the girl in the photo. Same ventilator, same stare. Behind him, the AV door slammed shut. He didn't scream, he couldn't. But somewhere in the courthouse vents, something whispered back. Chapter 6, the hallway that changed. They always say buildings remember. I never believed it till that night. See, there's a rhythm to cleaning the courthouse, especially at night. Buffing the floors in long, slow passes, I've walked every hallway in this place more times than I've said my own name. Hall C in particular has always been exactly 84 feet long from courtroom doors to the double security shutters. I measured it once out of boredom, then again for curiosity, and then again after I started to feel things shift in this place. But on Thursday night, just after the chaos from Black's second testimony and the court's sudden adjournment, Hall C wasn't 84 feet anymore. It was shorter, and not just a little. I knew something was wrong the second my buffer scraped against the wall 4 steps earlier than it should. My eyes snapped down the corridor. It was subtle but unmistakable. The symmetry was broken. I turned the machine off and let the silence settle. It pressed against my eardrums like a held breath. I counted my steps from one end to the other, 74 feet. I did it again, same result. A full 10 feet gone, not blocked, not sealed, just missing. Now maybe that doesn't mean much to most folks. Maybe some clerk would chalk it up to tired legs or bad counting. But I know this building like it was stitched into my bones, and Hall C doesn't just shrink on its own. Then I saw the door. It was at the end of the hall where no door had ever been before. No handle. Just a black metal plate affixed beside it with red stenciled letters, subpoenaed memory storage. I stood there, my mop dripping onto the clean tile, breath catching in my throat. I didn't know whether to laugh or run, but I didn't do either. I moved forward, because sometimes in this courthouse, not knowing is worse than seeing. The door opened before I touched it. Inside was a small room, bare concrete, lined with rows and rows of steel shelves. The shelves were filled edge to edge with red envelopes. No boxes, no folders, just envelopes, each sealed tight, marked only with sets of initials and dates written in a fine black pen. The air was colder in there, like the AC had forgotten it was summer. I stepped inside. The door closed softly behind me, not slammed, not locked, just gone, like it had never existed at all. I scanned the shelves, hundreds of envelopes, thousands maybe. My eyes darted across them until one name stopped me cold. LB 02172016. Black, February 17, 2016, the same date he mentioned in his sworn testimony. The Miami Hotel. Operation, whatever that meant. My fingers hovered above it, then curled around the edge. The envelope was cold. I opened it slowly, carefully. Inside was only one item, a Polaroid photo. In it, Diddy stood in the center of the frame, holding the hand of a figure cloaked in a black hood, face completely obscured. But that wasn't the strangest part. The background of the image was some kind of party. Dim lighting, velvet couches, champagne flutes. Dozens of people. But every single one of them had their eyes scratched out. Not blurred, scratched. Deep, violent gouges in the photo surface. Like someone had dragged a nail across each set of eyes, one by one. I stared at it, heart thudding. The figure beside Diddy, it wasn't moving in the photo, obviously, but I had the sickening sense that it had noticed me looking. That even frozen, it was aware. I turned to leave. The door was gone. Not closed, not hidden. Gone, just a clean stretch of concrete wall where the entrance had been. I turned in slow circles, chest tightening. No handle, no seams, just shelves and walls and envelopes. And then the lights flickered. Not just a flicker from weak power, no, this was timed. Intentional, like someone had tapped the switch twice to let me know I was not alone. I backed away from the shelves, still holding the photo, still unsure if I was supposed to see it. Then a sound from the far end of the room, a soft shuffle like paper dragging across paper. I didn't wait. I pressed both palms flat against the wall where the door used to be and whispered, "Let me out. Let me out. I'm not supposed to be here." Silence. Then, click. The wall didn't move, but a thin line of light split it straight down the middle. The door reformed in front of me. I swear it grew back, metal stretching like clay. I pushed through it the second it was wide enough. Out in Hall C, everything looked normal again. The lights were steady, the length was correct, the door was gone. Back to 84 feet. But something followed me. The photo was still in my hand. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. I tucked it into the inner lining of my coveralls and locked it in my cleaning supply locker. But that night, when I lay down in the basement cot behind the utility room, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those scratched-out eyes, the figure in the hood. About Diddy. About how Black had paused, just a second too long, before calling it transportation. Like he was afraid the word trafficking would summon something. The next morning I came back early. Something told me to check the docket for the day. I needed to know what was next. But the docket monitor glitched. It flickered, then reloaded. And right at the top, next to the judge's name and the date, were 3 words I had never seen before in this building. Unseen exhibit pending. I asked the clerk what it meant. She blinked at me, confused. Said no such listing existed. I showed her the monitor. It had reloaded again. Now it was gone. I went to grab the photo from my locker. It was still there, but something had changed. The scratches over the eyes were deeper. And now the figure in the hood. It was smiling. Chapter 7's Blink. They say some things don't need to be said aloud. But I've learned over all my years scrubbing court tiles and polishing brass plates that the things you don't say are the ones that echo longest. I don't get involved in courtroom affairs. That's rule number 1 for us janitors. Stay quiet, move around the margins, and clean what needs cleaning. But after this morning, I can't hold that rule any longer. It started before sunrise. I'd arrived earlier than usual because someone had spilled coffee near the witness box the day before and nobody bothered to mop it. Typical. I was moving my cart past the judge's chamber when I noticed car already parked out back. Black-tinted windows, no plates, just sitting there humming softly like something inside it wasn't powered by gasoline. I didn't see her go in. By the time court began, I'd stationed myself behind the velvet curtain just left of the jury box, where I pretend to fix a vent when I need an excuse to linger. The tension in the air was sour, like metal and sour milk. Black was still on the stand, still cool as iron, and there she sat. Hair pulled back like it had been sculpted, expression blank, hands folded over her lap. At first, I didn't notice it, the blinking. It was so rhythmic, so mechanical, that it didn't even register as strange. Blink, blink, pause, always every 1.3 seconds, I counted, like a metronome ticking away while everyone else fumbled through messy questions and half-truths. She blinked through the prosecution's inquiries, through Black describing something about coded routes and triangular safes. She blinked when the clerk dropped a folder, when the mic shorted out, when a bailiff sneezed. She didn't blink when Diddy started talking. That's when things changed. Diddy didn't even raise his voice. He never does. He talks like someone who knows words aren't the real weapon. But the second he opened his mouth, right as the syllable I dropped from his lips, the blinking stopped. Eyes went still, not glassy, not cold, just open, like a door left wide during a storm. Then the power snapped off. Only half a second, no more. But the hum of the air conditioning cut, the fluorescence flickered, and for that breath of time, I swear, the whole room held itself like lungs before a scream. Black began coughing violently. A deep, choking cough that didn't sound like it came from his throat. It sounded like it was climbing out of something deeper. He clutched the witness stand and dropped his lapel pin, the hourglass one. I could hear it hit the floor even through the murmuring panic. The judge banged his gavel and demanded order, but even she didn't look convinced by her own voice. Then the stenographer stood. You have to understand, those people don't move, ever. They're paid to record, not react. But this one stood, her face pale, lips trembling. I'm not writing that, she said. It isn't English. Everyone froze. The court reporter doesn't decide what's real and what is. That's not how it works. The judge barked at her to sit back down, but she didn't. She just unplugged her machine and walked out, just like that. I ducked lower behind the curtain, my heart hammering like I'd run up all 5 floors. That's when I saw the note, folded under the defense's bench, just peeking out near where the bailiff usually stands. I pretended to adjust my tool belt and bent down. It was written on yellow paper in thick black ink. If she stares too long, close your eyes. I didn't want to look up, but some part of me, maybe the same part that pocketed the hair bundle and played the Channel 6 tape, had to know, so I looked. And was staring right at me. Not through me, not past me, at me. Like she'd known I was there the whole time, like I was a page she'd been waiting to turn. Her face didn't move, her mouth didn't curl, her pupils didn't widen. but I felt something crawl down my spine, something old and wet and breathing just under my skin. I blinked and she didn't. The next few minutes blurred, was escorted off the stand, coughing into a cloth. Diddy leaned back in his chair like nothing had happened, eyes scanning the gallery like a satisfied cat. The judge called for a recess, but no one left, not immediately. I stepped out from behind the curtain, hands shaking, palms wet. One of the other janitors asked if I was okay. I lied, told him I was just short on sleep. He nodded like he didn't believe me but didn't care enough to press. Back in the janitor's closet, I locked the door and sat on the stool we use when our backs give out. My reflection in the stainless steel mop bucket didn't look right. The lighting was off, sure, but my eyes were twitching. Not blinking, twitching, like they wanted to close but didn't know how. I pulled the note back out of my pocket and read it again. The ink had bled a little, like it had absorbed moisture, but not from my hands. It smelled faintly of gardenia, the kind of flower that shows up at graves. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I came in early again, earlier than even the bailiffs. I needed to check something, needed to see if anyone else saw what I did. There were already 3 security logs erased from the digital check-in, 2 badge entries missing, no timestamp, just blank entries with a single tag, manual override admin level 2. I've been around long enough to know what that means. Someone higher than the judge, higher than even the courthouse manager, had gone in and erased something. Or someone. During prep, the courtroom lights flickered again, just once, but long enough for me to see her, already seated. Alone, not talking, not moving, just blinking. And then not. I got out of there before the hearing resumed. I walked the halls, cleaned doorknobs that didn't need cleaning, polished banisters until my hands ached. But all day, I couldn't shake the feeling that her gaze had followed me, that it had stretched beyond walls, beyond cameras, beyond reason. I saw a child in the hallway, a girl maybe 10 years old. She had no badge, no ID, no reason to be there. She smiled and said, "You saw the way she blinked, didn't you?" I didn't answer. By the time I turned around, the girl was gone. It's not just about what was said in court. It's about what wasn't, about what everyone agrees not to notice, but I noticed. Because in that courtroom, something ancient is speaking through modern faces, and it blinks in rhythms we don't understand. Chapter 8, The Mop Bucket That Wasn't Empty. After the day's final adjournment, the echoes of courtroom 7B clung to the rafters like cobwebs Reuben couldn't reach. The heavy doors had sighed shut, the judge's gavel had gone silent, and the tension, the kind that crackled low like a dying radio signal, was supposed to lift. But it didn't. Not tonight. Not after what he'd seen. Not after what he'd heard. He pushed the mop bucket across the tiled hallway, its wheels stuttering against the grout lines. The bucket was heavier than usual. Not the kind of heavy that came from water and chemical. It sloshed, sure, but not cleanly, not with the even, clear weight of mop water. It was an unsteady drag, a deeper kind of full, one that moved like something thick inside, something clinging. At first he thought maybe someone had dumped food or garbage in it by mistake. It happened, people ignored his signs all the time. But this didn't smell like old soup or soda. No, it smelled faintly metallic, like rain hitting pennies, or like the time he'd cut his hand on the stepladder and bled into the bleach mix. He parked the bucket outside the janitor's closet, wedging the handle against the wall to keep it steady. The door groaned open, and a breeze, strange, given there were no windows, pushed back against him. Before going in, he looked down. That's when he saw it. There was no water in the bucket, no mop head floating, no rags soaked with court filth, only paper, soaked through, folded, stacked and crammed, Pages upon pages of handwritten notes, the ink bleeding in spirals, dripping like it was still fresh. The words weren't random, not just some law clerk's trash. These were files, reports, full names, initials, and numbers, case numbers, dates. Reuben couldn't be sure. His eyes scanned one sheet, then another. One page caught him. It read in shaky script, "He's not on trial, they are." A chill trailed from his collarbone to his spine. His thumb brushed the top sheet, and it flaked apart in two. Underneath, nestled into the soggy stack like the only paper that refused to bleed, was a page laminated on just one side. Its heading stood sharp despite the wet ink around it. Testimony 9, redacted. The air grew still. The hum of the hallway lights cut out for a second, then back again. He lifted the page. It was almost a carbon copy of everything Black had said over the last 2 days. About the Miami hotel, about operation, about the coded messages. But this one had footnotes, addendums, corrections in red. And then, at the very bottom, written in block letters slightly different than the ones above. Diddy spoke the words, but she moved the mouths. Reuben's breath caught. That line wasn't in the official transcript. It wasn't in the Channel 6 footage. It wasn't in the AV room's archive. He would remembered. He didn't hear the mop handle slip from his hand. He didn't notice it clatter to the ground. He just stared at that single line until the ink felt like it was moving on its own, like the letters were trying to whisper. When he blinked, he realized the lights in the hallway were dimmer. They hadn't flickered, they'd faded, like a slow exhale, like someone was watching and dimming them deliberately. He turned to enter the closet to stash the paper away or maybe burn it, but there she was. The woman. Not the clerk, not a witness, not anyone he'd ever seen on the court's payroll or in the benches. The same woman he'd seen near Hall C, the hallway that changed. The hallway with the door that vanished. She stood just beyond the shadow of the closet's overhead bulb, wearing a gray wool coat with buttons that seemed too smooth, too flat, like they'd never been stitched by human hands. She didn't step forward. She didn't raise her voice. She just tilted her head and said, "Time to clean the next one." Reuben didn't ask who. He didn't ask what. Some part of him, deeper than memory, already knew. The trial they were watching wasn't the first. Maybe not even the 100th. Behind him, the courtroom doors cracked open again, not from a hand, but from pressure. The air inside the bucket grew thick with that same metallic smell, and the papers started to rise, even though there was no wind. One page floated to his shoe. It was a seating chart of courtroom 7B, but the names weren't of jurors or attorneys. They were initials. Dozens of them, each circled in red. Each with a check mark. Except one, his. RM, no circle, no check. The lights dimmed again. Far down the hall, the exit sign flickered. He stepped backward into the janitor's closet and shut the door, breathing hard. His hands trembled, and he pressed the redacted testimony to the wall under the inspection light. The ink shimmered like oil on water. A faint knock came from the mop bucket lid. He didn't want to check. But he did. The papers were gone. In their place, a single cassette tape, green labeled, scuffed around the edges. It read Deposition B. Carter, eyes only. His throat went dry. He hadn't seen anything filed under her name directly. She was always present, always there, but never explicitly addressed in court documents. Always mentioned by others, never named in court by a judge or clerk. But this tape, it changed that. Reuben checked his old Walkman, still in the bottom drawer with the old gloves and hand salve. He popped the tape in and pressed play. A few seconds of static, then a voice. Not at first. It was Diddy, calm, slow, measured. She told me to say it, not out loud, just to think it. The rest, it moved on its own. Pause. Then another voice, her voice, clear, velvet smooth, and something else behind it. A doubling, a breath layered over a growl. They stare at the performer, it said, but the echo controls the show. The tape ended in a high-pitched ring, like air being let out of something metal and ancient. The player sparked. Smoke curled from the battery port. He dropped it into the bucket, didn't care if it melted. From the hallway, voices rose. Not yelling, not screams, chanting. He opened the closet door. The courthouse was no longer empty. Figures lined the corridor, dozens silent, all in gray coats. At the far end, a second mop bucket rolled toward him. No one pushed it. Inside, a new nameplate. It read, Courtroom 9C, assignment begins. He stepped out. Somewhere behind him, a door creaked open. He turned to look, and the lights blinked off one by one. First down the west wing, then the foyer, then the hallway behind him, until all that remained was the red glow of exit, pulsing above the doors like a warning that had come far too late.